I'm Sonia Azad. Welcome to The Shift, a place to inspire growth, resilience, and wisdom, real connection, healthy conversation as we navigate life's changes and challenges together. Because, as I like to say, we are all each other's teachers.
Thanks to our friends at The Wealth Woman for making this podcast possible. Hair and makeup generously provided by Glam House Collective.
Hi there, I'm Sonia Azad. Welcome to The Shift. I am at Sanctum Med and Wellness, joined by my friend Dr. Jessica Shepard, who is a women's health expert, gynecologist. You kind of do it all.
I do. I don't know how I got there, but now I'm just like the Jane of all trades.
That is not true. You don't know how you got there. A lot of hard work and dedication and wisdom. So I like to start each episode with asking, how are you doing in one word? Today, just how are you doing?
Today I am grateful. That's my word today.
Okay, yeah. I love that. I love knowing what you're coming to the table with today. And I too am grateful to be here with you and to be here with everyone. You have so much great information and knowledge to share. And we're going to focus today on menopause.
We are.
This is
I love how you bring the word in. It's like menopause.
Well, when I have talked to you or any physician about this in the past, I get so many questions from audience members, and rightfully so, because this is a tricky shift in life.
It is.
And that's why this podcast is called The Shift, because we're talking about different shifts that we go through and not always talk about. So first of all, let's just start with, what is menopause? When does it start commonly?
I think, looking at it as a shift or a transition is probably the best way to conceptualize it. And when we think of the word menopause, I think it's fascinating when I tell people that menopause actually is like one day. So as you're leading up to menopause, we call that perimenopause. And that just truly means your estrogen is starting to decrease and your ability to procreate is getting to a final endpoint. Now, clinically, the word menopause is really more of a clinical term. And that clinical term just means 12 months that you have not had a cycle. So 12 months of no cycle, that 12 month and that day is technically menopause. And then after that, you're postmenopausal. And so it really is just a clinical term for doctors to know how to say, I know that this particular woman has gone 12 months consecutively with no cycles and now she's postmenopausal.
So when you're in the second month or the 6th month, you are in menopause.
Perimenopause.
You're still in perimenopause.
Yeah, until you get to that 12-month mark of no cycles, then that's menopause. And then after that, you're postmenopausal, because it's kind of like a birthday of the second half or the third quarter of your life.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's why you say it's one day.
Yeah.
Because it's just there.
We
and
know that
done.
they've reached that 12-month mark.
Okay, so then what I really want to start with now is perimenopause, because this starts actually earlier than people think.
Absolutely. And this is where I think the confusion starts. The New York Times came out with an article recently, and it was beautiful because, one, they're talking about menopause, but the actual title of the article is that women have been misled by menopause. And that's because there's so much confusion behind it, namely, what does menopause mean, but the time frame leading up to menopause. And that's when you're starting to see this decline. I kind of like to say it's like if you walk into a room and there's a dimmer switch for a light, and you're just slowly dimming that light. And that's what the estrogen starts to do over time, which can start as early as 40. Most people probably in their latter 40s. And they start to have decrease in their cycles and increase in symptoms such as vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, irritability. And that's really what is the perimenopausal phase. And then you get to that menopausal phase, and then you're postmenopausal.
Okay.
I'm really trying to make it sound so delightful.
I know. I'm like, okay. Wait, so when you said 40 and 41, and you start to feel some of these symptoms or notice them, what are you supposed to do? Do you talk to your doctor and say, hey, I'm maybe perimenopausal? Is there a way to check this? And what do I do with it?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that in two different answers. So a lot of people come to me and say, I think I'm perimenopausal or menopausal, can you check? I don't typically like to check because there's no real way for us to check with a lab to say you're perimenopausal. What I do know is after 12 months of not having a cycle that you're menopausal, because it's so different for everyone, that perimenopausal phase. You may have women who have an estrogen level of a certain amount but no symptoms, or you may have another woman with a lower estrogen amount and maybe some symptoms. So it's very hard to kind of figure out what that balance is of estrogen levels and symptoms. It's more so the conversation, and that's what I would say. Like you asked, should I talk to my doctor? Yes. I'm totally for starting the conversation earlier, rather than waiting until like you're full blown with these symptoms, you don't have a cycle anymore, and you feel like you're kind of in this vortex of symptoms. I don't like when women get to that point, because then it's so confusing and it's frustrating. So I'd rather start that conversation earlier.
Is the time that you become perimenopausal linked at all with when a girl starts her period? Like if you started at 9 or 10, does that mean you're going to be perimenopausal sooner?
No, there's no like predilection for if you start your period early, you're going to get to perimenopause earlier. The best way to probably tell when you'll hit it is your mom. And looking at kind of like your familial history of like, when did my mom kind of start going through perimenopause, or other women in my family, but more so your mom, and seeing where that is, because that's usually when you'll start to have some of those symptoms as well.
I do have some viewer questions for
I love
you.
viewer questions.
I know you do, so that's why I brought and there are plenty when we talk about menopause, okay? But Christy is asking, what steps should I take to prevent perimenopausal weight gain? And since we're talking about perimenopause, is that one of the things that women experience?
It is, and I love to discuss this, and this is why I've taken my practice so much to look at perimenopause and menopause as like the key topic of my practice, is because there's so many varieties of how people experience menopause. And so weight gain actually is one of the things that occurs in menopause, not only due to decrease in estrogen, but also a decrease in testosterone, and also how our thyroid functions. So what we see is that during menopause and perimenopause is that how our fat distributes in our body changes. And that has a lot to do with nutritional impact on how we process the food that we eat, what stays, what lingers, what stays around. And also when our fat deposits, it actually moves more from the hip area distribution to the abdominal area. And that's when you start to see kind of the loss of the weight, the waistline, and more of the weight gaining more towards the abdominal area, which is very frustrating. I've heard so many women say that they start to see more of that fat distribution in their abdominal area. And that has to do with the hormonal shift, how we process nutrients, and that's why I really focus on nutrition in that time frame in your 40s and 50s, because I know what's coming. And if we can make those small changes early, you can see so much more impact in the long term. And exercise also is another way. The way we exercise should change in more of what we call like of our HIIT routines, like more short bursts of like rapid activity.
We should do that.
Correct.
Okay.
Rather than what we used to do before, it was like more longer duration kind of cardiovascular activity, and weight training is so very important. We start to lose muscle mass very early, like late 30s, early 40s by a significant amount. And so we call it like this protein effect, this muscular effect, that you start to lose all this protein. Your appetite increases, but if you're not replenishing that protein, then that's where you start to see some of more of your muscle mass loss and your fat accumulation increase. It's such a beautiful ratio there that it... I
know, I'm like, this sounds so fun.
But you know what I love is that before, you know, when I was training, we really had no answers. It was like, yeah, you know, I had women come into my office and they'd be like, I am experiencing this or that. And I'd be like, that's so horrible. And have like no answers for them.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. And now I really start to see that research, science, and also even products. You know, a lot of products are formulated to help women through their journey. I'm very hopeful that we'll do a lot more, but we have come a long way.
Well, and I think, yes, of course we have, right? Women are living longer, first of all. They're taking, I think, better care of themselves in a lot of ways that, you know, generations previously did not.
I don't think we were given the luxury either.
Right.
It was just kind of like, oh, well, yeah, you're finished with having kids, or if not, and you're 40 or 50, so, okay, thanks, bye.
You're sort of like discarded.
Kind of like you hear in Hollywood, too. You know, like, older actresses, like they talk about this all the time, like they cannot find jobs, which sounds really ridiculous because you're actually probably a better actor now.
Yeah.
And now you can't find a job.
Yeah, with all that wisdom and experience in life, you've gone through it.
Right.
Okay, so when you talk about some of the symptoms that people go through, the reason I wanted to talk to you is because in your work, you look at the whole person and you don't just throw medications at people. And I understand the value of medicine, obviously, but I like some of the alternative approaches to this stage or this shift of life. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because there's so many.
There's so many alternatives, and I think...
And if people don't know about them, they sound kind of scary or woo-woo.
Yeah. I even say that to myself. Early in my career, it was very, how we train in Western medicine is very focal to this person's having this issue, this is how we're going to solve it, usually through some type of medication or surgery, which is fine because it is necessary at some point. Do you need it all the time? Not necessarily. Do you need as much as possibly we have available? Not necessarily. And that's why I've shifted into how I look at the whole body, and specifically looking at it a functional medicine way. And that's what I talk to my women when they come in the office, is saying, I have opportunities for you to change the trajectory of how you're feeling the symptom, but it is going to take some work. The work of the small things that you start to do in your life that you're going to see the shift in the long run. And also looking at it from a form of what can I do in my nutrition, my daily life, even if it's just balance and flexibility exercises that I'm doing, even if it's small weight training exercise that I can do to help with my bones. Or I tell my mom this all the time, even if you do crossword puzzles to really help with the brain activity, because we start to see dementia specifically after menopause because of aging, but also decrease in estrogen. And so what I have really focused on is what can I do for sustainability in giving you quality of life, but not necessarily relying all on medication. And that comes with why we have what we have at Sanctum, which is looking at acupuncture, yoga, meditation, and then looking at how you incorporate that into your life, working with a pelvic physical therapist and a stretch therapist to help you with the things that we know are going to decline over the next, 40 years, maybe even 50, so that you have a better quality of life. Everyone's going to age. That's one thing that we know. But do you want to take the aging process and do it gracefully and have control over it? Or do you want the aging process to be in a way where it's just kind of like dictating now what your life is going to be because you didn't necessarily take those small steps?
It's almost like taking control of these shifts in life and also loving yourself enough to treat yourself well during them.
So think about the first part of our life where we're, when we're younger and we're really just trying to thrive and grow, and then we have a good portion of about a good 20 years when we have a lot of responsibilities, whether that's with career, whether that's with kids, family, significant others, taking care of other things other than ourselves. I really want women to look at that latter part of their lives as being selfish. Selfish to take care of yourself enough in a self-love way that in the end, when you look back at the course, being like, I actually did take a good portion of taking care of other things other than myself, but I am so glad I took this portion of my life to take care of myself. And now I'm seeing the benefit of it.
So, I think what I heard you say is, if you have hot flashes, maybe try a cooling form of yoga or breathing exercises or acupuncture. Does that really work?
It does. And now what I love is that there is science and data behind it. And I really use that part of my Western medicine to find the studies and the research that's going to substantiate why I'm telling women this. And I think that, we can learn a lot from other different practices, Eastern techniques and modalities, and what they've done too. Because let me tell you something. When you look at menopause data and symptoms, it's actually Western world women who actually usually have more severe symptoms. Do you know why?
No.
Because it's our lifestyle.
That's what I was going to say. I can imagine that it's just the way we're living.
Imagine what's in our food, right? So a lot of things that are not natural and more processed foods, we don't move as much as other countries and cultures. And then also we don't take care of ourselves in a way I'm gonna look it up after because I forgot, but in Japan they actually have a word for menopause which actually means like rebirth, rebloom.
That's really beautiful.
Rather than menopause, it sounds like. So decline, the horribleness.
Like, it's amazing to me though, because you sort of have two camps of women, those who have all of these symptoms and have a really hard time with it, and then some women who I've heard from who are like, yeah, it was kind of a breeze, like, it was no big deal, it's fine.
They're the lucky ones, I would say, in the sense of they're the minority.
Okay, yeah.
When you look at vasomotor symptoms, when we're going through hot flashes, night sweats, sleep disturbances, irritability, 85% of women will experience that to some degree. Now, I will say that some women have it very severely and some women have it very mildly, and then some have none.
Do we know why?
We don't know why.
Okay.
I think we know that ethnicity has some play in that, obesity has a play in that, and also any issues with diseases like hypertension, diabetes, right? That will kind of bring out those as well. But when you look at ethnicity, Black women actually have a longer duration of menopausal symptoms and more severe. And then you're going to see that shift towards Latina women, and then you'll see white women, and then Asian women, as far as degree and severity and duration, decreasing order of what I just said.
Yeah. When you get into the postmenopausal phase, because like we need to talk about these women too.
Yes.
How should they be caring for themselves at that phase? Like what happens then? Because I hear about menopause a lot, but like not really postmenopause.
Yeah. So postmenopausal women, what we have now seen, and heart health is a very big part of that. Heart health and also hormone replacement therapy. And that's what that New York Times article was really referring to, was we did have some glimpse of hormone replacement therapy in the 90s. And there was a study that was done, WHI study, which had some not great outcomes, but it wasn't due to the hormones. It was one, the women that they had done the study on, they just did a bad kind of collection of women. They're using like older women who were like in their 70s or 80s, women who smoked. So they weren't the prime candidates for hormone replacement therapy. So that's why they had those outcomes. So shifting till now, we do know actually the benefit of hormone replacement therapy, which actually is good for your heart health, which is good for your sex drive, and is also good for your metabolism, which is, again, goes towards your weight. So we have seen a shift back towards hormone use, and it's now getting the word out because there's such a bad press moment when that study went on, so that everyone was like, bad word, hormones. Hormone replacement therapy, bad word. And so now everyone kind of like pushed it under the carpet, and now we're like, no, it actually was good, but now we have to get the message back out.
When should you start looking into that?
I am so glad you asked that. So we do know the best time to start hormone replacement therapy is in that perimenopausal phase. So as you're getting into menopause and the first 5 years of menopause. So remember, no more cycles for 12 months consecutively, that first 5 years.
Okay.
And also, you know, they have extended it to saying within the first 10 years of menopause, but I am a little bit more towards the 5 years to get the bang for your buck as far as hormone replacement therapy and decreasing those symptoms.
Okay. I have one more question for you from a viewer. This is Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa.
Palpitations. She's like, why am I feeling palpitations? Is that a symptom of menopause? And if so, how long is this going to last?
That is a really good question, because palpitations actually can, one, be something of a heart condition that needs to be checked out. So I would always recommend seeing a cardiologist, because heart disease is the #1 killer of women. And usually it's going to be after menopause. Why? Because estrogen is heart protective. See a decrease in estrogen. Therefore, your heart kind of is not getting the best benefit of estrogen. Now, the last thing I would say is when you're looking at menopause, palpitations, anxiety can present as palpitations. So it's not to say that you have an anxiety disorder, but you can be experiencing things in life that bring on a little bit of anxiety, and that's how you're manifesting the symptom through palpitations. So I always say it's a good discussion to have with your doctor to figure out if it's one of those, so you can actually get it addressed in the right way, but also decreasing that symptom.
Well, and when I circle back to what you said earlier about acupuncture, yoga, breathing, I mean, all of those things will support your health in terms of, you know, anxiety, but also like weight and really everything else, all the other symptoms that we've talked about.
I feel like it's the internal work that that always brings. Like, how do we work on how we feel about ourselves, decreasing that like kind of constant like on edge feeling. And that really manifests in different ways in people. And that's a way to address that as well. What is our mental state and how are we addressing that?
Okay, one last question for you.
Just one last one.
Women in their 70s.
Yes.
This is for my mother. Should they still be getting mammograms?
So what we know is that breast cancer is 1 in 8 women will experience that in their lifetime. Now, when we say lifetime, that can really be as long as a woman is going to live. So typically with a mammogram, yes, we do still encourage women who are in their 70s to get a mammogram. Now, I think that's a good discussion to have with a physician to see risk versus benefit. How does the person feel about a mammogram, especially in their 70s or 80s? But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're kind of off the hook because they're in their 70s and their 80s, because they can still get breast cancer. And how I see screening tools and screening tests such as a mammogram is that is a specific test to find out if there's a disease process going on before you have symptoms, right? So breast cancer is one of those things that you may not have a symptom in early stage, and early stage is the best way that we can actually cure breast cancer. So I do think that that's the discussion that should be had around breast cancer and mammograms for specifically women who are in their 70s, but it's a great screening tool. And so I feel if you have the ability to detect a cancer very early and prevent it and cure it, then why not?
Yeah. It's again back to that taking care of yourself, loving yourself enough to do
Just
it.
loving on yourself.
Dr. Shepard, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you. I always learn something. Like I'm almost in perimenopause apparently, or like maybe I'm there.
I feel like I'm like at the end of this. I was like, oh God, I could see it on your face. And I was like, uh-oh.
Oh yeah, my face does not lie.
Don't worry, I'm there with you. I'm right there with you. I'm perimenopausal and I'm embracing it. I'm gonna.
Do you have symptoms?
I do. I start to have like hot flashes. Like I'm sure if you ask my husband, he would say the irritability part for sure. She's perimenopausal. He's like, out of a 10 out of 10. So yeah.
But that was probably before perimenopause, let's be honest.
Right, exactly.
Just kidding. Cheers to perimenopause.
Yes, cheers to perimenopause.
Thank you. Absolutely. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you guys for joining us for this conversation. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to comment. You can ask your questions, like it, subscribe, share. We'd really appreciate it. We'll see you next time on The Shift.
This series was brought to you by The Wealth Woman. Why settle for a traditional financial advisor that only keeps you from going broke when you can work with The Wealth Woman? She'll show you how to build wealth for both your lifetime and generations to come. Money is just a tool to help you build a life you're excited about. Visit www.wealthwoman.com to learn more. And don't forget about our friends at Glam House Collective. Let's get glam.